Welcome back, Camden Catholic. Welcome back, Honors. Good to see you. Y'all are going to each have about like 2-3 flips, because like I said earlier about the imperialism stuff, so World War I, imperialism, things like that, are things I'm super passionate about. So everybody ends up learning them at the same extremely intense level. Very nice, right? Some of your honest kids are like, whatever, we're used to it. Some of these CP kids are probably like, it's fine. Like, so all this stuff will end up on your final, okay? You will not be individually tested on it. Remember, you have the map quiz next Wednesday, but let's get into it. So most of us left off in class right here. We were talking about how nationalism is a major factor in the leading up to World War I, right? The Great War, the war to end all wars, the First Industrial War. Now, Pan-Slavism is a major trait of those national trends leading in to this war, all right? So Pan-Slavism is this concept where all Slavic people believe that they should unify and defend one another, right? So Pan-Slavism is like, for example, Russia supporting a little place like Serbia, right? Saying that we are each Slavic countries. You, like us, should have your own right to rule over yourselves, right? And a lot of this comes from several different places. A lot of this comes from cultural commonality incited by nationalism in the late 1800s. A lot of this comes from the fact that a lot of South Slavic nations in the Balkan area are oppressed by places like Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, right? A lot of this also has to do with these alliance systems, right? So Russia despises the Ottoman and the Austrians, right? So if they don't like them, one good way to stick it to them is to support these little Slavic countries that are under their rule, right? So anyway, continuing forward. But then these things are going to start bubbling over, right? A lot of y'all probably don't even realize, but there were two small wars that actually broke out right before World War I in 1912 and 1913, all right? And they were the Balkan Wars. There were fueled tensions in South Slavic states that were encouraged by nationalism, right? All these little Slavic countries like Bulgaria, Romania, Serbia, Montenegro, Albania, Greece, Serbia, these different areas fought off an Ottoman occupying force. Now, this thing was devastating for the Ottoman Empire, right? They were dying and losing power very quickly, and they lost the bulk of their territory in Europe due to this. Now they're reserved over to what everyone on their map said was Turkey, is actually the Ottoman Empire. But their empire extends mostly into the Middle East. Oh, the first sip of coffee every day. Oh, so good. All right, so now, anyway, so this is what the Balkans are looking like after the Balkan Wars, right? So notice you got Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, Albania, Montenegro, Serbia, and they are in a pincer-locked position between the Ottoman Empire and Austria-Hungary. Now, for the longest time, I've always wondered about this little guy. I never know if this little guy is actually still in the Ottoman Empire or not. It looks like they are. I guess they might be. But as you can see, things are starting to get very, very tense. And leading into this entire thing, this guy is the one that kind of stirs the pot more than anybody else. Because here's the thing. Every history book and every historian starts to refer to that region of the world as one of these. All right? So the Balkans became known as the powder keg, right? The Balkan states became known as the powder keg for one extremely important reason. The powder keg is a great metaphor for the tension going on in that region of the world leading into this war, right? Now, what I mean by that is, think about a keg of black powder. Black powder is used to fire weapons. Black powder is a high explosive, right? If black powder is pushed too hard, gets too hot, or even comes close to a flame, it will explode, right? And the powder keg area was the Balkan states because it was ready to explode from anger and nationalist tensions into war, right? Now, it finally lights up, though, when these guys come in, all right? So the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. You might want to pause this really quick, get all this stuff down, and then we'll get into it. Yes, there are a couple of little vocab terms in there you don't need to write down if you already know what the word oppressor means. All right, so now the war starts off when the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. Now, a lot of people think that, like, this guy got shot and then bang, we got trenches dug. It's not the case, all right? So it's a very, very unique story. It's very odd. There is a very good book by Adam Hochschild called To End All Wars that does a phenomenal job of actually going through every single event. It has to do with like vacations and mobilization and blah, 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 blah. So the war starts with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Now let's get a look at Archduke Franz Ferdinand where am I going? There we go. This right here, no. This right, no. That right there is Archduke Franz Ferdinand, okay? He is the second in line for the Austrian throne, okay? He is arrogant, impetuous, and a lot of people don't like him. But speaking of being arrogant and impetuous, guess who loves him? This guy right here. Kaiser Wilhelm and Franz Ferdinand are related. They're cousins, and he loves Franz Ferdinand. He thinks they're so similar. He thinks they'll be BFFs. He thinks that if he becomes the Austrian ruler, then, yes, that is going to be a power duo like you've never seen, even though Austria was really weak at this time period and very, very awful when it comes to fighting wars. All right, so anyway, now then you've got this guy. That's Franz Joseph. That's the current Austrian king, right? He, ironically enough, hates this guy who is his nephew, all right? So that's Franz Joseph, who is the leader of Austria, okay? And then you've got these two guys over here who are also related to all these guys. This is Tsar Nicholas II. Ooh, no, that's Tsar Nicholas II. Yeah, that's Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. And this is George V of England, right? Who had actually just recently become king due to the death of his mother, Queen Victoria. Mm-hmm. Or grandmother. I'll have to look that up. Now, and then you have one last Garfield-looking character. Or actually, it looks like the Lorax. And that's George Clemenceau, who is the president of France. All right? So, but the irony is, out of all 6 of these people, these 5 are related to one another, right? And they still end up falling on opposite sides of this war following this assassination, right? So, there we go. Now, Franz Ferdinand was assassinated for a multitude of different reasons. Now, you have to understand, too, jot this down. Political assassinations were a trend during this time period, right? Every single political figure, like since the late 1800s, knew for a fact that there was a good to solid chance that they could be shot or assassinated at any given moment, all right? So assassination attempts and successful assassinations were very, very common, all right? So, for example, Franz Joseph, Franz Ferdinand's uncle, I showed you him. He doesn't like Franz Ferdinand, and after he got shot, he was like, oh, dang, whatever. All right, so, and then he moved on with his day. Ironically enough, in this entire situation, I've got to plant something new in there. His wife was subject of an assassination. Franz Joseph's wife, Cece, short for Cecilia, she actually, or Elizabeth, one of the two, but Cece was stabbed outside of a theater by an Italian anarchist using a sharpened-up file, right? Tsar Nicholas II, his grandfather, when he was Tsar, was blown up by assassins because they used suitcase bombs and they blew up his carriage. And then when they blew up his carriage, it turned out that he was actually riding in a bulletproof carriage that was given to him by Napoleon III, who had multiple people had tried to assassinate as well, right? So as you can see, this is a very, very, very common thing. So a lot of you are like, well, how did this lead to worldwide war, though? A lot of it has to do with how things were handled, all right, following the assassination. But here it goes, okay? Here's the story, and it's a good one, too, okay? So Austria-Hungary, as you know, looking at your map from 1914, controls a lot of territory, all right? Very, very large area. Now, they control particularly one area now. I'll back it up to this map right here. So all this orange is Austria-Hungary. All of these guys are independent nations, all right? So Serbia is now an independent nation of itself. It's called Serbia because it's full of Serbs, all right? So here's the other thing, though. Serbs is a cultural group and a language. It's not necessarily a race restricted to those borders, right? So there are other Serbs that live in this place called Bosnia, all right? So even though, ironically enough, Serbia and Bosnia today doesn't get along, all right? So now, Bosnia, though, is under the control of Austria, right? So many Serbs and Slavs live in Bosnia. So they see the Austrians as oppressors. And of course, an oppressor is somebody who holds another one down. So a Serbian nationalist group had actually been bubbling up this entire time. Two of them, actually. There's one called the Young Serbs, and then there's one called the Black Hand, right? Now, the Black Hand plotted to assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The Black Hand liked to use young men to try and get these things accomplished. The conspirators that were the ones that were going to try and assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand, none of them were over the age of 25, all right? So they were very young men, younger than Mr. Terry, right? So this Serbian nationalist group had also successfully corrupted a lot of things in the Serbian government. They had threatened and blackmailed the current Serbian king to follow some of their demands. They had certain people inside the government. They're a very well-connected group, right? And so they decide to try and actually have him assassinated. Now, the Archduke had a visit to Bosnia planned for June 28, 1914, right? Now, on June 28th, he was going as a goodwill procession, right? He wanted to do what Kennedy was doing in Dallas before he got shot, right? So the idea is a parade, a motorcade, to try and show that the Austrians are the people you want ruling over you. So the business visit, right, to try and go there, was planned to go to a place called Sarajevo, all right? Sarajevo is the capital of Bosnia. S-A-R-A-J-E-V-O, Sarajevo, all right? So Sarajevo had all this big stuff planned. They were like, all right, we're going to have a nice car for him. It's going to be a convertible, right? We're going to roll around the entire city. He's going to shake hands. We're going to make nice, because the rich Bosnians loved the fact that they were ruled by the Austrians, because the Austrians got lots of money, all right? So, and then this is his wife with him, Sophie, all right? So now the first plan was for 6 assassins to assemble very fast. 5 of them were going to do different jobs, all right? 5 of them were going to split the duty between jumping out in front of the car to slow it down and make it stop, right? The other, the rest of them were going to back the crowds up, right? And then one lone assassin was going to come in with a grenade, right? And he was going to pull the pin, and he was going to drop the grenade in the car, much like they did to Alexander II of Russia, but they used a suitcase bomb, and they slid it underneath his carriage. They were supposed to drop the bomb inside of the car, and the problem is the guy that was supposed to do it, I want you to imagine, all of you know Dan Becker, right? I want you to imagine Dan Becker is the one that has to drop that grenade in that car. So Dan Becker, instead of actually doing it the right way, decides to punk out and goes, Kobe, and then tries to shoot it in there, misses the car, and then hits the crowd in the back, right? So they end up injuring several people. The guy who threw it missed, injured several people nearby, that had to go to the hospital after that. Now, out of everything, you would think that the Archduke decides to himself, you know what, I'm just going to go home. Somebody tried to assassinate me. But he didn't. Speaking of the assassins, too, let me rewind a little bit. Several of the assassins were arrested. And when they were actually going out that morning, the 6 of them met up, had a strong cup of coffee, and then they all passed out cyanide pills, right? A cyanide pill is something you take to kill yourself if you think you're about to be captured. Well, several of them at this first instance were captured. I think it was about 4 of them were actually arrested, right? So one of them, it might be the one that threw the grenade. I'm not sure. All right, so I always get this guy mixed up. He apparently took his cyanide pill and then ran, but then his cyanide pill was expired and wasn't strong enough. So he ended up just getting violently sick and throwing up. So he tried to jump into a river to drown and die that way, but the river was too shallow. So he ended up just splashing around in water for a little while until he was arrested by the Austrians. Now some of you are like, well, wait a minute, Mr. Terry. I thought you said this guy got assassinated. This is a failed attempt at assassination. I agree, but it's hilarious. All right, so anyway, now, the Duke's parade, though, instead of just going home, back to Austria and just calling it a day, decides to go to the hospital to visit the people that had actually been hurt by the bomb, right? However, he ends up going along his parade route. Now, this right here says takes a wrong turn down a street. That is true. He derivated from the original parade route because here's the thing. Cars haven't been around for a super long time, right? Motor vehicles are a pretty new thing when it comes to history in 1914. But the thing about it is, new cars, inexperienced drivers, car accidents. So a car accident had occurred on the parade route all the way up in front of them, so they decide to take a turn on a block in front of them, right? So they turn going somewhere they're not supposed to, and then there's a coffee house. And one of the assassins, Gavrilo Princip is his name, was sitting out front of that coffee house, eating a sandwich, drinking a cup of coffee after his first failed attempt at assassination, and then he just runs. And he sees their motorcade coming, and he fires 2 shots into the car with a revolver, right? He strikes the Duke in the neck, in his jugular, killing him, and then he turns and he shoots his wife, Sophie, too, right? So this guy, Gavrilo Princip, fired 2 shots and assassinated the Archduke of Austria, leading to this war. This is Gavrilo Princip being arrested right here. This is him actually taking the shots into the car, and this is the Archduke and his wife Sophie moments before this happened. Like, it's absolutely crazy. I think he looks like Shia LaBeouf. All right, now, so anyway, but this entire thing then leads to a thing known as the July Crisis. A lot of people think, well, wait a minute. I thought that war was just going to bang off like right then. No. All right, so it took a little bit, all right? The July Crisis then breaks out because in July 1914, okay, you have to understand something funny about this whole thing. The July Crisis took a whole month to get figured out, and it gave people time to assemble their armies. But July is the month of the year when emperors, kaisers, kings, and their military generals have vacation. So, ironically enough, this took a long time to get started. It took a whole month for this war to actually blow up because it happened in, the assassination was in June and it didn't start until August. So, they had to take a break. Now, the July Crisis, though, was in July 1914 when Austria issued demands to Serbia, knowing full well that they couldn't complete them, right? And the irony is that Franz Joseph, the Emperor of Austria, he sent the demands and then went on vacation. So, Russia, when they hear about these demands, begins to mobilize their military. So what ends up happening as well is, I need you to write this down, Kaiser Wilhelm, who kept saying over and over again, if you invade Serbia now, this will help out everything, gives them what's known as the blank check. So write that down, the blank check. The blank check is not an actual piece of paper. It's a guarantee that no matter what happens, Austria, we will back you up. Russia begins to mobilize its military. Now, the Russian military takes forever to mobilize because it's such a vast empire with country roads and gravel, and they don't even barely have, railroads yet. And then what ends up happening is this domino effect. Now, some of y'all are like, the domino effect, Mr. Terry, actually has to do with the fall of communist states in the late 1970s. This theory from the Truman Doctrine that was actually put forward. Okay, calm down. I'm putting the domino effect in quotes because I think it makes sense here as well. All right, so Austria is going to declare war on Serbia, knowing that they can't meet these criteriums after the July Crisis, and this begins right in the beginning of August, right? Let me double check on my date. Now, anyway, so Austria declares war on Serbia. July 28th, the very, very tail end of July, right? So then the alliances begin to kick in. Austria declares war on Serbia. Russia, then saying they can't avoid war, begins to declares war on Austria. Germany, because of the blank check, turns around and then declares war on Russia, right? So now you've got these people mobilizing their armies really slowly, though, right? It takes a long time to get ready to go to war. You can't just be like, I would like to war now, and then just go, right? It takes time. You got to mobilize your armies. They got to call the reservists up. It takes time, right? So when this is all occurring and these cogs are slowly starting to turn, instead of just being calm, cool, and relaxed, Germany had to ruin everything for everybody. So Germany then ends up invading Belgium, right, to try and get to France really quickly, and we'll talk about that in the next series when we get into next week. And everything just kind of blows up. A lot of people use it to look at it like this. That right there is how World War I ends up breaking out. So, because it was Austria attacks Serbia, Russia attacks Austria, Germany attacks Russia, France attacks Germany, so it's just a crazy, crazy instance. So I'm going to come back right here, and I think that's all you need, right? Yeah, so, yep. And you can pause it right here. You can wrap it up, and I'll talk to you guys later. All right, so I hope you enjoyed it. See you guys on Monday. Have a great weekend.